I'm kind of a believer in that we all have to drink every drink or every pill or whatever the substance that we needed to, right? To get to that point of willingness, surrender, the gift of desperation, whatever, all the things that we want to call it. And for me, it's like we say that I think truly recovery is a program of action, right? Consistency over time. And for me, even something as simple as I wasn't willing to fully take the suggestions yet, right?
All right. Welcome back, everybody. My name is B. Reeves. I'm the Director of Business Development here at New Waters Recovery, sitting here with our CEO, Justin McClendon. And our special guest today is Meredith Brill, also known as Clean Coaching Mama.
I
And
guess.
hey, Meredith, thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you, Meredith. Real quick before we get started, I did want to point out, just to get the awkwardness out of the way, B and I are basically wearing the same color shirt right now, which we typically don't do, but it's a thing. It's
Mine have
happening.
some subtle stripes, which is kind of a no-no anyway, but we'll get
That's
through it.
funny.
We will. Yeah.
I didn't even notice, but now I have.
Now
Yeah,
you have.
that's all you're going to think about for the
That's
rest of
it.
the podcast.
You're welcome.
Well, be even worse if I was wearing the same color, right?
It would be amazing,
Yeah.
actually.
Ah.
Well, thank you for coming. And to be clear, Meredith does live in Raleigh, but we're doing this virtually due to some scheduling constraints. So thank you for doing that. And yeah, so a mutual friend of ours and of New Waters introduced us by phone, and so we've never technically met in person, but we talked the other day, and I'd heard of you. I think by maybe somebody else I know from the rooms, as it
Mhm.
were. And so tell us
Yeah.
just what do you do and how did you start doing it?
Yeah. Well, the most important thing, I'm Meredith. Brill's actually my maiden name. My husband will kill me if I don't say Brierly is my last name, my married last name. And really, the most important thing is I'm gratefully sober for 13 years. 13 years this past
Awesome.
January.
That's awesome.
And my husband is 15 years sober.
That's
So
amazing.
sobriety is really the anchor for our life, right? The foundation for everything. Um, and I kind of say a number of factors brought me to what Clean Coaching Mama is and kind of honestly who I am today as a sober woman. And it was kind of a combination of, having my kids older. I was 37 and almost 40 when I had my two boys, and marrying someone who is 9 years older than I am, who I joke was like borderline pre-diabetic, and he would be fine with me saying that when we got together. And then my background is a pediatric speech therapist as well, which was a second career that I did in sobriety. I went to graduate school in sobriety. I did corporate sales stuff during all my crazy years, which I will definitely get into. But all those things, I was trying to get pregnant. Which I mean, I'm so grateful I was able to get pregnant quickly. But they really pointed me in the direction of health, right? We get sober and then we're like, okay, wow. Well, we learn about HALT. We learn about, and right now I'm going to give you guys like a 20 minutes. So I'll keep that. Let me rein it in a little bit and we can get into that stuff later. But I would just say that it's sort of, I kept peeling away the onion more and more in terms of what can we control about our health. But at the same time, I'm all about putting the principles of recovery into practice in all areas of my life and not taking myself too seriously, right? Being gentle with myself, warding off perfectionism, all that kind of stuff. So I like to approach it in a very balanced, um, gentle way. And I ended up getting certified as a health coach and then starting Clean Coaching Mama, I think almost 2 years ago. And I do a lot of events and workshops. I've taught classes. I do individual coaching as well. And I have lots of free resources too. So it's kind of my jam. Clean living, low-tox, cleaner eating, all that kind of stuff.
Cool. Well,
Yeah.
when we backtrack for just a second, I saw that you did live in New York and worked in advertising back before you were sober and living cleanly. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I was one of these people. So yeah, I moved to New York City. I went to college in Chapel Hill. I'm actually from around here. I'm one of those weird people that grew up in Cary. And I moved to London for a year and then New York for almost 10 and did corporate stuff all those years. And you know, this is really, I mean, totally tied to my alcoholism story because, I was one of those people that I say drank myself into alcoholism. I didn't start fully out of the gates, right? Obviously, I had the predisposition. Obviously, I had the atypical relationship with alcohol, the tendency to black out, the tendency to love that feeling, all that stuff. But I was like super focused on not disappointing my parents, basically, and trying to, quote, do well, whatever I thought that meant, right? So, you throw somebody like that into the corporate New York City 20 something world that is ripe for compare and despair and beating yourself up and, work drinks every single night, flip cup tournaments and beer pong and um, all of it, right? So it was fun for some years, fun with consequences, and then it got bad. And anxiety is a big part of my story, as are anxiety pills. So
Hmm.
I'm well acquainted with and was for several years with Klonopin, and Xanax, which the funny thing is they were, of course, doctor prescribed, right?
Mhm.
Um, all the while I was drinking pretty much every night. So it just spiraled. And it spiraled into a God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself type turn of events. Um, a bad breakup, getting fired from a job I'd had for 3 months that
Hmm.
I'd been completely buzzed for during the interviews. By the way, which I laugh now. I can laugh about it since it's been 13 years. The first years in sobriety, I would still get a little bit, it took a while for all that shame to erode. But, I was working for Fast Company, which is a really cool business brand. And it was a great opportunity, right? But I was just I mean, oh my gosh, I was awful. I would go for like 3-hour lunches and just, expense them. And I mean, come in late with, dog related. I had a different dog then, but
Mm.
dog related vet excuses all the time. New person on a job, but mind you, right? And just, yeah. And then after I showed up, and it's funny because this vivid memory actually came back to me in the last year or 2 of sobriety, and I'd forgotten about it. I would say probably I still don't know exactly why I was fired because I did not ask when they offered more information. I was just like, "Yeah, time to get a drink." But we had a meeting with the IBM media team, my head publisher, who I, like, barely knew, and I literally told her I would just, like, meet her at the office, and then ended up going and getting, a couple of vodka sodas before because that's what I had to do at that point. This was, like, the end of my New York years. So, I'm sure she smelled, I mean, it's funny how we think people don't smell vodka, right? But, needless to say, that entire meeting was a haze. I don't even really remember it. And the next week I was fired. So
God
moved back
doing
to
for
North
you what you
Carolina.
couldn't do for yourself.
There you go. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
100% blessing, immense gratitude now. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting.
Came back to
I
North
didn't.
Carolina. So
I hear. Well, I'm also one of those weird people who's from here, born and raised in Raleigh, and I lived in London briefly, and then New York for about 5.5 years, and
oh my gosh, I
was
know.
definitely not sober, but relate to the compare and despair, because everybody made more money than I did, and I just remember people would be like, "Hey, we're gonna go to dinner," and then go out, and I'd be like, "I'll just meet you out." Like I didn't have $200 to go spend at dinner when I was 26, and I can't say I was trying to really impress, make my parents proud. I think I was just trying to. I don't know what I was trying to do. I was trying to make everybody else think I was cool. I think more than anything.
Mhm.
Um, but again, this is not about us. This is about you. And so I just wanted to hear a little bit about your New York, but that it's all part of the one of the many tiles in the mosaic of our lives, right? The
Yeah.
New York, whatever city it is, whatever we did to. Um, I mean, for me, it was a series of bottoms, and a few of them were in New York for sure. But so you moved back, and then so what year are we talking? I'm trying to do the math on your 13 years.
So, okay. So I just turned 45 and I got sober at 31, just shy of like I turned 45 in March. I got sober, 13 years sober in January. So I moved back here well, it took me, I didn't get sober immediately. Some people do. It took me a
Yeah.
little while to be convinced. Um, I moved back here, I guess I was 31, and I came back here, I had a bad breakup, I got fired. of course, I thought that this was the opportunity to, like, go to grad school and start, like, a totally new life, and, I thought that anxiety was the problem. You have to realize at this point, I didn't think drinking was a problem. I really didn't. So
Okay.
I thought I was just coping with the bad alcoholic relationship. Of course, I didn't know it was alcoholic at the time. Corporate America, my bosses, the stress of New York, all of it. I thought it was anxiety was the problem. So, moved back to my parents, thinking I was just going I say I crawled home with my tail between my legs to kind of regroup, and I was seeing a therapist in North Raleigh who suggested drinking being a problem, and I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she was like, "Well, a lot of these stories seem to have to do with being drunk." And I'm like, "Whatever." So she suggested I try to stay away from drinking. It just didn't work. Um, and I was like sneaking, hiding, living in my parents' house in Cary. And I finally went to AA meetings, went to 12-step meetings to appease my parents and my therapist. And I laugh. I mean, there are women who are still in my life, and we laugh about this. You guys can probably tell I am a talker. I would go to meetings, sometimes drunk, not even sober, and double share, like literally double share, right? I mean, how embarrassing. So, but I just got the whole keep coming back and, do you need a ride? And such warm reception from the recovery community. And I mean, again, I can laugh about it now, but I just wasn't convinced. I mean, I started going to like young people's meetings. I felt like I was young back then. And honestly, I heard a lot of, in jail, DUI. Of course, I should have had DUIs, but I thought, that didn't relate to me. Um, but I heard a lot of stuff. I heard a lot of hard drug stories. And even though I obviously have a pill, part of my addiction story, I felt like, whoa, these people are like real, like drug addicts. Like I was so arrogant and just looking for the, differences and not the similarities. So, yeah. So I wasn't convinced. And I ended up going to a 30-day. I went to Fellowship Hall in Greensboro.
Okay. You
I
guys
may have
got
heard of it.
you
Oh,
guys
I
got
was
so
about thought
many
maybe you were gonna say you've been
similarities.
there.
I have.
Yeah. Well, New Waters wasn't around back then,
Yeah.
That's
or I would have
right.
been there in a second because I've been there for meetings. It's a gorgeous facility, and I've talked to people who've been there, and I know you guys are doing such great work, such a
Thank you. We
needed
appreciate that.
resource in this area.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Fellowship Hall was a step down. Um, but it was great. I mean, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about alcoholism, which honestly, I did not. This sounds kind of like, what kind of an idiot are you? But I didn't have a lot of addiction in my family. I didn't grow up around, and I didn't get into my family stuff yet. But for 12-step and addiction standards, I had a pretty normal family. Now, we did have some stuff that I think contributed a lot to the emotional dynamics that I think are there in most of us who end up in substance abuse. Um, but I didn't know a lot about alcoholism. So Fellowship Hall, I learned about the physical component, that mental obsession. It eroded some of that shame that I had with this like association that people were suggesting I was an alcoholic. So I did not stay sober after treatment. I always tell people treatment is great. It gives you a foundation and it gives you contained sobriety. But what really matters is what happens when you leave, right?
Think you're crushing it, but I mean, I'll throw in something right there.
Yeah.
We completely agree with that statement that, we're big believers in treatment. Uh, but treatment is just the beginning or, a place for you to, you know, create separation between you and the substance, learn some good stuff, hopefully have some aha moments about like what's going to be necessary to be able to sustain sobriety. But what happens when you get back home is what's most
Yeah.
important. You know what I mean? And I think there's an argument to say that sometimes people need to go away to treatment in order to have enough of that separation to where they even stand a chance of being able to be sober when
Definitely.
they get back home. But yeah, what happens when you get back home? That's where the rubber meets the road, as they say.
Yeah, we were
Yeah.
just talking about this
Yeah.
on a donut another episode, and I was talking to a guy this morning who's leaving New Waters to go to further treatment, and
Mhm.
basically saying what you're saying is just, we can't be in treatment forever.
Yeah.
So eventually we got to take matters in our own hands and still need and ask for and receive help on a daily basis. But we don't have somebody waking us up and telling us to be here and there and taking us on a bus to meetings and back and forth and telling us where to be.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I certainly needed to be separated from the substances long enough to get physically okay, but also needed to learn a lot about it. Cause I have similarly, I asked my mom about it, and she just said, I just asked, do we have this in our family? Cause I grew up around lots of drinking and all that, but there was nobody who was a real alcoholic addict had been to treatment or needed to, or anything like that. But she said, I had a great uncle who, I remember your grandmother would bring him cakes when he would get his first anniversaries, but that was so basically this was all of my own making.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's funny. That is a lot of similarities, but,
There is, right?
I
yeah,
know. We need
Interesting.
to
That's
chat
interesting.
offline. We've got
I
a lot
know,
of stuff.
I know we will. But, and so you finally do find your footing, even though treatment didn't take, and, cause back to that, it creates it can, I see it every day, a false sense of security where people are like, well, I just went to treatment and I
Yeah.
learned so much about everything.
Right.
Then they come home, and there's a really strong correlation between, especially going to 2 meetings, but at least 1 meeting the day somebody gets home. And obviously sometimes people get home at midnight and they can't go, but within a 24-hour period, because that's what happens is, with every day that goes by, it gets easier and easier to say, well, I haven't drunk alcohol or picked up a
Right.
drug yet. I'm
Yeah.
all right. And then 2 days goes by and it's like, well, I don't need to go. And
Yeah.
then a week, and we all know how it goes. But you said you stuck around long enough, even though you were drinking at first, but there's something you kind of, even though you were sort of comparing and, you were comparing out instead of identifying with, but something about it kept you coming back. And then that's the thing that is so important is we all think that, or I'm not going to speak for anybody but me, but that for somebody to get better and get and stay sober, that person needs to say, help, I need help, I'll do anything. And then they go take suggestions and do it right then.
Right.
That's like perfect world, but that almost never happens. But it's really about just going through the motions long enough to get some results and just to
Right.
see that, wait, this does actually work. So,
Right.
and why not keep this up?
Oh, totally. And, I'm kind of a believer in that we all have to drink every drink or every pill or whatever the substance that we needed to, right? To get to that point of willingness, surrender, the gift of
Mhm.
desperation, whatever, all the things that we want to call it. Um, and for me, it's like we say that I think truly recovery is a program of action, right? Consistency over time. And for me, even something as simple as I wasn't willing to fully take the suggestions yet, right? I mean, that was my big thing. I kept doing stuff that really wasn't smart if I wanted to stay sober, right? And it was, my last drink wasn't even anything. I had more dramatic consequences during those drinking. It was about 6 months from when I came to AA. I went to treatment in the fall, August, September, and then my sobriety date is January 1st. And there was no grand proclamation to January 1st, which people laugh about, like New Year's Day. Like, oh, I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure that's a good sobriety date.
Mm-hmm.
It was just the last day of utter hell.
Mm-hmm.
I had gone on a trip that was not suggested, that was not recommended. I'm a
Mhm.
social enough person that I was, like, super connected to these women, like the recovery women that I'd met. And, yeah, I'd gone on a trip to the old boyfriend with my dog, to Ohio. I mean, he was a drinker. I mean, it was just nothing about it was a good idea, right? And, of course, I ended up drinking. And what is so magical and so, in my opinion, really a divine moment in what ultimately happened is that, that last drinking, it was like slamming a Bud Light, hiding it in my suitcase, slamming a Bud Light, hiding it in my suitcase, just to the point of being like, what am I doing? Waking up the next morning and literally like being on my knees. I had believed, I do want to touch on, this a little bit, but I'd had a relationship with God. I'd actually been involved in a church in New York City. I had met a pastor to talk about my anxiety over beers, over pints. I had gone on a missions trip years ago. I mean, I was acquainted with, faith as a part of life. So in that, I didn't have a problem with that, some genuine, not just the foxhole prayers, but like a real like, okay, God, please help me. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. But I sent this long manifesto off to like all my girlfriends, and I was just like, yes, this is a new day, and but everything changed, and I started doing, like we said, the actions. I started really doing what was suggested, and trusting that, a lot of people think in early sobriety, life should start looking great. And we
Mhm.
forget, how long it took us down that road to get to that point, right? There's a lot of wreckage. There's a lot of damage. And if this is, in fact, a disease that's really about our thinking, right? We've got to do some work before things are going to change. So
Yeah.
that's where I think I was lucky too, in that I didn't have a lot going on. I was like doing prereq classes for graduate school. Most of the people I'd reconnected with, I wasn't even, because I'd come back to my North Carolina life, I had some good friends who were still in the area who were like solid people who knew what was going on. But I was like really connecting with recovery people. And there was a point I was doing 2 AA meetings a day, which I know people are like, how would you? Now I can't even imagine doing that with my schedule. But that's what I was able to do. And I got in the middle of recovery.
Yeah.
And it has just been, I mean, life happens and hard stuff has happened, but I've never left the recovery community, not in these 13 years. I don't plan on it. My husband's story is the same. Um, and it's just, it's those actions, right? That's where the change comes. So,
That is, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up about staying in the middle of the pack. I mean, I remember hearing several different metaphors for it. And, the elk who get picked off are the ones who are on the edge of the herd.
mm-mm.
And then one guy, I remember he said, it's hard to fall off the middle of a roof.
Yeah.
And I just, I was kind of like, again, like you a little bit where when I got out, I took some more time off work and I had the luxury of I would go to sometimes 2, even 3
Hmm.
meetings a day. And I just did it. And I was willing to do whatever they told me to do. And but I started getting results. And when I was 6 months sober, after listening with, not wanting to, but listening to my sponsor, helped me figure out for myself not to go see fish on 2 separate occasions. And but when I was 6 months sober, I kind of was like, I think I'm okay to do this. And he agreed. And I went to meetings every day in New York, and I kept hearing, and it's the first time I'd been to New York sober, um, other than when I was probably 9 years old. And this was and I went to meetings every day, and I heard a different person say the same thing, which was, I came for my drinking, I stayed for my thinking. And I needed to hear that right then and there, because I was like, to me, 6 months was a long time at that point.
Hmm.
And it is, for somebody like me. And I was like, okay, I'm doing all this stuff, but my thoughts are just so out of whack. And when I heard that, I felt like, okay, I needed that confirmation right then and there, that reaffirmation that I'm right where I need to be. And then, when like you were saying, we think we're magically going to get better, because that was kind of how I felt. I was like, I'm sober for 6 months. Why am I thinking like this?
Mhm.
But in hindsight, yeah, I was sober for only 6 months.
Right.
Yeah. And I think one of the things this is just reminding me of that with what you were saying is that, and I talk to women about this a lot, in my, in recovery, meetings, is that like I was not one of these people who thought, oh my gosh, sobriety. I mean, yes, I had a pink cloud, but I also had to really rely on that idea of it's not going to look this way forever and staying in the day. And, you mentioned going to a concert. For me, I was so arrogant still. I was so disconnected from like my actual emotional reality. And I was like, North Carolina, like, am I gonna stay in North Carolina? Like, what? Like, like this is gonna be my life forever, sitting in AA meetings all day? Like, are you kidding me? I like to travel. I'm a foodie. I love restaurants. I love like going out. I love and I was like, "Okay, okay, okay, but I'll just stay where my feet are, stay in today and trust that it will get better." Then, going out to a restaurant for the first time with friends in recovery, going to a wedding. My brother got married. I wanna say 2 years sober, and he's a partier, and it was like a 4-day affair in Pittsburgh or something, lots of drinking events. And looking back, I mean, now there's been a lot of others, but that was one of the most powerful experiences I've had in sobriety, right? Going through that as a sober woman, using my recovery tools, being able to be a part, experiencing that freedom that we get when it's not, you know, an issue. It's not like a kind of fear, right? But being a part of, but doing it in a smart way that I was able to keep my sanity, my serenity, and really be grateful. And that's how it's been for everything, whether it's traveling, whether it's, eating out, whether it's concerts, whether it's, and part of it, my husband and I talk about this a lot. I don't know about you guys, but like part of it is also learning who you are in sobriety and delineating what was more alcoholic me. So like
Mhm.
there are certain things that, even for my husband, watching football isn't the same. Or, you know, like I don't care as much about concerts now. I mean, I like
Same.
them, but like a lot of things were more of like another reason to go party with everybody. So it's like figuring out, well, I love eating out, right? I mean, New Yorker, hello, I'm a real foodie. And that's really what it's about is like the fun, the restaurant experience, um but am I at the bar for 2 hours before? Am I going out for drinks afterwards? Am I staying? No. Like I'm there for the dinner now.
Mhm.
I mean, I used to joke there was like so for the end of I lived in Hoboken actually the last year of all those years. There were a couple restaurants in Hoboken that were really, like, critically acclaimed restaurants, but they were, like, either BYOB or they didn't serve alcohol. I never went to any of them the whole time I was there because I was like, "Why would you go to a restaurant if you" know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
literally,
dude.
like, steps from blocks from my apartment.
Yeah.
So, it's just interesting, learning how to, because it's like we get sober to live life, right? Not like, that's something I just so strongly believe in, but it doesn't happen at 30, 60, or 90 days sober.
No, I
It
hear you.
comes
I
with
remember
the
sitting in
process.
treatment and was on a pink cloud and was just like humming with excitement about being sober. And then I was overcome with fear briefly when I would just started thinking about, wait a minute, I feel great, but wait a minute, how am I going to go to a party, a wedding, a
Mhm.
concert, a baseball game, a date, a comedy show,
Oh,
New
date?
York,
Yeah.
Europe, New Orleans, anything? And then I thought for another 30 seconds, wait, how did I do any of that before when I was so handcuffed to substances in order to even do it? And, and since then, everything I've mentioned, I've done. And, to your point about the wedding, it's important to have those to get through stuff and, be accountable and have call a sponsor and friends in recovery and, an escape plan, have our own beverage there and all the things it tells to do. But trying to do that on a daily basis, and not that we're going to go to a wedding every day, but hanging out in bars and drinking ginger ale, that sounds awful. And then, that expression, you hang around the barber shop long enough, we're bound to
Yeah.
get a
Right.
haircut. And so
Yeah.
what I realized pretty early on was, and I just kind of stayed away from all that stuff. I didn't go to that fish show till I was 6 months. Wedding just happened. I didn't need to go to one for about 6 or 7 months, and
Yeah.
other stuff. I just kept it really, really small. And I kind of saw basically my old friends. I'd see them during the day, but like I didn't
Yeah.
go hang out at like party. I just didn't, I just stayed away. But then,
Yeah.
but getting through that stuff, was important. And what I realized though is I can't, I'm not going to try to live the way I lived minus substances.
Right.
That just sounds awful. But when I
Right.
have a good reason to be there, it's back to the motives, like it says, if I have a good reason to be somewhere, then I'm there.
100%. I'm so glad you brought everything you're saying. I'm like, "Ooh, I gotta say something about that." I I completely, it's funny. So, um, I am so grateful that, it goes back to the freedom, right? So, yeah, it's like my friends. So first of all, as in I'm 45, so if my kids are 5 and 7, I mean, a lot of my mom friends are like 10 years younger than me. It's like a joke that I shut down at 9 PM. I'm like, "No." It takes a lot for me to do, if I wanna go do something in the evening, I will. But everybody knows, I'm just not like and if it's like book club, for instance, like I'm in a neighborhood book club, they're not a swigging, bottles of wine type book club because I tell them if you were, I wouldn't want to be a part. I don't really want to be around that. Right.
Mhm.
So I think part of it is, it's funny because I have some friends who are still staying too close to alcoholic drinking life, I would say. More of your proverbial like country club, drinks every night kind of thing. And my husband and I just aren't, that's not our scene. We haven't built a life around that. Um, and I think it's like sometimes I used to think that everybody was like that like
Mhm.
everybody partied like that. But like what's really nice is when you're looking at life differently, you just honestly connect and relate with people and the world around you on a different level and differently. Not to say it's better, but you're just drawn to different things, right? So it's like I can
Mhm.
be a part of all these like groups or organizations or friend groups that aren't recovery people, but they're just people who are like not getting wasted all the time, right?
Normies.
They're normal,
Normies.
right? And I think that that's such a blessing because, I was totally like you though. Those early, I'd say first year, 6 months or a year, yeah. And I love that you brought up dating because yeah, I mean, that was a whole big thing. Dating and early sobriety. Um, and I remember saying at treatment, "Well, you mean I'm supposed to get married?" I mean, I was single. "You mean I'm supposed to get married and not like have champagne at my own wedding?" That was like a big thing I was hung up on. And I remember the counselor being like, "You're not even engaged. Like, calm down,"
Yeah.
you know? And lo and behold, my husband and I had a sober wedding. We had a sober honeymoon and it was great. I mean, we were both sober and I mean, it wasn't even like on my radar that it wouldn't be sober.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Meredith, I know we're kind of on the tail end here, and I didn't want us to miss the opportunity to hear a little bit more about what you do and the wellness side of things. So if you could maybe kind of share a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I did share a little bit of how I sort of got to
Right.
that place.
Yes.
I think, and this is really more entwined with my mom. Part of my identity, I guess, is the mom role. So because my husband is also in recovery, and he does come from long, addiction background, all that. So much more so than I do. But we're so intentional, right, about everything, right, in our family and in our parenting. And I think I'm just extra conscious of both for myself, my family, but also helping others. And that's not, they don't have to be, not around substances, just this concept of like whole health support, right? Like, what can we do? I mean, like, for instance, anxiety and depression, right? There's really interesting research out about what's going on like in the gut with things like that, right? Like what we eat and how we live basically affects everything, right? That's my belief. And it's really empowering to me, both in my own home, but with other people to help them feel empowered by that. And to say, wow, okay, I never really thought about reading food labels like that. Or, wow, helping people learn about added sugar, right? And how sugar is pretty much pervasive. And it's
Yeah.
funny to the recovery community because in early sobriety, we're like, eat all the ice cream you want, eat all the candy you want.
Right.
But
Right.
honestly, we have, I mean, I don't ever like to, it's funny, like when I present to moms groups, like one of my slides is like the health stats, right? Current health stats on trends in adults and in pediatric populations. And the reality is they're not good, right? We can't argue with that. They are not good. And I am of the mindset that our ultra processed foods, our uh, environmental toxins around every corner, our stress, our more sedentary lives than ever before, our device focused um, lifestyles, all these things, right, contribute. So, what can we do? What, realistic swaps can we make? What products can we buy? What habits can we adopt? Whether it's introducing easy meditation or mindfulness to busy moms. Like I was presenting to a preschool moms group not long ago. And I mean, I remember having like 2 kids under 5. Like, there's no time for meditation. You're too tired at night. They're up too early in the morning, and you have too much to do during nap time. But can you take slow, deep belly breaths when you're in the car for a few minutes? Yes. can you find an anchor of how your body's feeling? Is your body feeling safe? Is your mind all the way up here or all the way back there? Those are tools that we can do. And that's actually a recovery thing, right? Like we have the tendency to be ruminating on the past or projecting on the future.
Mm.
And everything about how I approach wellness, everything I do with my family, for myself, I mean, I did a tapping meditation earlier before I met with you guys because I wanted to, we had my husband's traveling, we had a busy day. Like I wanted to ground my body, right?
What's a tapping meditation?
Oh, it's EFT, emotional freedom therapy, tapping. It's somewhat not the same thing as EMDR, but it's just a meditation. Yeah, anybody who's in the meditation world, therapists use it a lot. It's tapping on the energy meridians while you're
Mhm.
repeating statements. It's like acupuncture meets cognitive behavioral therapy.
Cool. Cool.
So just stuff like that. Like I don't know. I think it's just funny how, is it odd or is it God that
Mm.
I got sober and then it's literally been a progressive journey of, how do I live cleaner? How do I live healthier? And not in a like crazy obsessive way either, just in a what's doable. And then, I mean, I'm 45 and my hormones are great. My provider said, I've never seen liver numbers that look this great. And I was like, wow. And for a recovered alcoholic, that's great.
What
But
are a few things that people could do, whether they're in recovery or not, in terms of just a few things, especially in the pantry or the refrigerator, that are easy things that you
yeah,
would like the first thing you would say to replace or get rid of?
yeah. Well, I always tell people to first try to get a handle on added sugar. And by get a handle on it, just start looking at it, usually, right? I mean, some of us are already into that. But you'd be surprised. Sometimes, I mean, I love when I do pantry makeovers and people are like, whoa, the applesauce with like 12 grams of added sugar per half cup, or how the Smucker's jelly, versus the lower sugar options. To just start looking at the added sugar line in your ingredients, bearing in mind that the recommended limit is 24 grams or less per day for women and children, 35 or less for men. So that's not a lot, right? I mean, one can of Coke has more than that. So for,
Mhm.
the illustration. So look at added sugar. Um, and focus on your staples. Don't worry about the things that the ice cream that you love or, that one, you know, snack bar that your kids love. Focus on your staples, your breads, your yogurt that you might eat every day, your cereal that you might eat every day. And work on those, reading those labels and understanding that if there's a whole lot of ingredients listed, it's most likely fairly processed,
Okay.
right? Shorter ingredient lists are usually cleaner ingredient, less processed foods. I have
That's
like
awesome.
yeah, I'm trying I don't want to give you guys too much because I know it can be
Mhm.
overwhelming, but I always say focus on your staples. And the thing that's funny, and this is the last thing I want to say, I mean, I exercised like, I was like hot yoga and like fancy yoga studios and spinning and Equinox spin classes in those New York years. I've always liked exercise, but the stress piece of both recovery and just wellness, if we're like we're racing around to go to the gym and do this with our kids and go, 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 like a lot of us are. I mean, look at the numbers of, anxiety. Look at how stressed we are. I always say that stress is actually the most adverse health factor. So, getting a handle on stress. And then what does that take? You know, starting exercising, slowing down, saying no to more, trying to do a little bit of mindfulness in a way that's realistic with your family's schedule and with your season of life. So,
Love it.
That's awesome.
Perfect.
hopefully
I think
those
that's
weren't
a
too
great place
many.
to That's a great place to no, we wanted that and thank you. And that just a little taste and a teaser so people will
Yeah.
go. And on that note, how do people find you, Meredith?
Well, I have a website, of course. Everything is linked on my Instagram, Clean Coaching Mama. Those are pretty much the
Okay.
best ways. Yeah. And then
Okay.
my website, cleancoachingmama.com.
Cool. Well, hey, this has been awesome.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
we have plenty more to talk about. So maybe we'll do a part deux. Um,
Love to. I know.
but
I can think of everything right now I didn't even get to.
well, thank you so much for being here. This has been really awesome.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you
you,
so
Meredith.
much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
If you liked what you heard today or just want to know more, give us a call on 919-670-8119 or visit us at newwatersrecovery.com. Thank you.